Welcome to the Core Women Podcast, the place for women entrepreneurs, authors, and self-starters looking to build community and gain valuable insights through expert interviews with women at the top of their game. Join your host, podcaster, producer, expert coach, entrepreneur, and author, Dr. Summer Watson, as she aims to inspire and empower you through these candid conversations. Lean in and embrace the journey. It's time to start the show. Here's your host, Dr. Summer Watson.
Today on the show, I would like to welcome Emily Leahy, who is a dynamic serial entrepreneur with 15 years of experience across education, wellness, consulting, and tech. She spent 6 years in San Francisco coaching and mentoring venture capital-backed startup founders, entrepreneurs, and executives, driving both business growth and personal transformation. Emily excels in enhancing personal and organizational effectiveness, delivering exceptional results while minimizing stress. She is the founder of the Feminine Template and founder in Flow, where she continues to transfer chaos into meaningful progress using innovative strategies and practical methodologies. Welcome, Emily.
Thank you, Summer.
I am so excited to have you here today. There's so much to chat about. But before we dive into your professional journey, if you could describe your journey in one word to this point, what would that word be?
I would say trust.
Trust. Tell us more. Why that word?
Yeah. For me, my journey has been following the breadcrumbs, and it didn't always make sense. It was definitely a lot of different puzzle pieces.
Okay.
And I knew this years ago. And I'm like, okay, I have a lot of interests and I have a lot of different gifts, and I don't know how they're all going to come together, but I also felt like it wouldn't make sense until I was inside a certain context. And so when COVID was occurring and now the future of work and how everything has expanded and how we've evolved, it does make sense to me now why I was collecting all of these different certifications along the way and experiences and building different kinds of businesses that overlapped, but at the same time had a lot of different angles. And there were just so many different people I was working with. So yeah, I think it was a process of trust to be like, okay, eventually I'm going to get to maybe the ultimate place, never fully arriving, but like having it all connect in some way. And I feel like I'm finally entering that phase of my life now.
Oh, how exciting. Was that trust more like trusting yourself, trusting the process?
I think it's always a mix of both, right? Like I had to trust that I was making the right decisions based on the information that I had.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was also trusting the process because, there's only so much we can be in control of. I think we're all part of a bigger picture, right? And then we all have our ways that we contribute and add value.
Trust plays a part in a lot of the things that we do. And it really harkens back to maybe our childhood and how we've learned how to trust, not just others, but ourselves and the process. I'll give you a funny example. The other night, I was trying to make pistachio paste, and it was really just blending up pistachios, but it was supposed to turn into a paste. And I'm like, it's not happening. Why isn't this happening? And I was like, okay, stop. And I really had to take a moment to stop and go, all right, the directions are saying, keep blending, keep blending. I'm like, man, I have been blending forever. Is this ever going to turn into an actual paste? And they said that the oils would be enough to turn this into a paste. I kept going. And finally I'm like, oh my gosh, it's happening. It's happening. So we get to that point, right? We make the paste. We just have to keep blending. We have to see if there's anything that we need to add. And it sounds like that's kind of how your journey has evolved. And this is a great lead into my next question. Tell me about the evolution of your journey and what motivated you to build companies across such diverse fields, such as education, wellness, consulting, and tech.
Well, I started out as a school teacher and I was already in the education field. And when I was teaching, I was really blown away by how wellness tools were not being integrated yet into the system and how many kids were failing because of that. So I was already starting to sit at that intersection of education and wellness before it was a thing because of my own interests, right? My own passions for it and performance, again, this is before people were talking about productivity and focus. I was left to my own devices because I didn't have a specific learning disability as a kid. I had a different way that I learned compared to the copy and paste system that we live in. I was like, okay, I need to figure that out. And so I just did at a young age in high school. I was taking psychology classes. I was reading Howard Gardner's theory of multiple intelligence and just learning how I learned And I was like, wow. And as soon as I did that, I got straight A's. And, I was also recovering from different health issues at the time too. And so I was just very self motivated to heal myself, to figure things out. But I also wanted to belong. So that was really fascinating. So I might have been a little bit more controversial earlier in my life, but that sense of belonging and trying to fit in probably held me back from testing some limits. But I knew at the same time what I needed to offer in order for it to get into the school system. And then I found like other programs that, just really aligned with that. So I was bringing yogic tools, but we just cut out a lot of the verbiage, and so then I was able to go into schools and teach districts. I was invited to teach at my college that I graduated from for a summer course, like very early. Just like a year after graduation. So I was able to do all these things. I really loved performance, wellness, education. But I had something in the back of my mind that technology was going to be evolving. And if I wanted to make the biggest impact possible, someday I would need to figure out that industry or get into it somehow. And it was a fleeting thought, but it was a thought that I had some kind of visceral experience when I had that thought. I remember what I was feeling at the time, and it just kind of stuck with me. And so, yeah, it was something that was in the back of my mind for a long time. But I don't know how I'm going to get into the tech industry, but one day I will. And yeah, and then consulting, coaching, it was just, for me, it was always let me build companies and share as I go. And everyone was always curious. So really just falling into these industries. And when I went out to San Francisco, that's how I got into the tech industry. So again, like I would have this foresight of like, I have a hunch. And then I would let it go. And then I was like, oh, this reminds me of that thought I had, or this reminds me of that knowing without knowing, that gnosis. So I find it so fascinating how if you can follow the breadcrumbs, you might end up in some really unusual places. And if you try to tell the story without kind of going through each part, it seems so random. But whenever I tell the full story, it's like, oh, that makes sense. It was just kind of going from one thing to another, following hunches, following different ideas of how I could add value, make impact.
Absolutely. Well, it's interesting how you say follow the breadcrumbs, because I think when we envision something that we're passionate about, we try and write it down and kind of push it and form it and mold it. And maybe we don't always stay with the passion, or we get sidetracked, or we're not following those breadcrumbs, so to speak. Follow those breadcrumbs. Let's make sure we follow through to see what the outcome might be and trust that process. And so you did that. And it led you to the Silicon Valley, to San Francisco. So tell us more about that journey, the San Francisco journey, the tech journey, the VC-backed startup founder journey, and your approach to business and personal transformation.
Yes, so I had just let go of a brick and mortar business that I had created. It was angel backed, and I loved creating this wellness studio. It was amazing, but at the same time, I felt trapped. It was a paradise prison, feeling like I had to go to this building every single day. And I loved creating that kind of community, but I felt stuck. If I could just coach, consult, and help a lot of people, but have some mobility and flexibility, that would be probably more aligned. So I had that hunch after being stuck in this role for about a year that was supposed to be my dream, and realizing, yeah, there's got to be more. And not feeling like I could really expand at that time on the East Coast. I felt that I was a bit too progressive. So I went out to San Francisco again. That was just a hunch. I was with someone at the time, and they were like, you just let me know when you get one of those thoughts and you have an idea where you're supposed to go. I'm like, okay, no pressure. Like, I'll just find where we're supposed to live and decide. But it did come to me, I think, after a few months. And funny enough, when I reached out to my partner at the time, because we were in different countries. I think I was in Canada, he was in the US, and I was finishing up a program. And I said, hey, I think we're supposed to go to San Francisco. And he said, that's wild, because like 2 minutes ago, someone just said that they had a sublet in like the Bay Area. And I was like, okay, that's good enough for me. So we went out just a couple weeks later after selling all our stuff. Like, let's just go for it. Let's pull the trigger. We've been kind of waiting for a while. And when we went out, it was really fascinating. Like, I was like, there's so much opportunity here for me, because everyone had already been deep into the wellness journey, and I had tools that expanded beyond that. But I really wanted to bridge the entrepreneurship with the wellness, because that's what I was doing at my wellness studio. But the entrepreneurs I was working with, they were more small business owners, really, really new on their journey. And I just knew I could take people who are already pushing their limit and bring them further without tipping over. Like, I know that I have that capacity. So I started unboxing my tools. It was kind of like Mary Poppins, just like taking all my things out of my bag. And people are like, wow. And I had the language to really bridge versus maybe some people who were a little bit too out there. It's not that I needed to prove everything, but I built trust with people very quickly because there was that resonance in my journey and as an entrepreneur and how I was using the tools. So, yeah, I was helping entrepreneurs with deep states of meditation, very like hypnotic states of meditation, where people who had really busy minds just couldn't seem to tap into that creativity. And they were experimenting with maybe drugs, or they're experimenting with self-help books or psychology tips or productivity hacks, but they just weren't getting there. And then they'd work with me, and it was like, wow, it's like I can go from A to B and make my decision quickly. And I don't second guess myself as much anymore because they could just tap into what they needed to tap into. And I was working with men and women, but yes, I was working with like all different types of entrepreneurs, VC backed founders. I was working with investors. I was working with people who are transitioning out of like Google at like really big level positions, like managing positions, Twitter, Facebook. And they were like, I just want to build my side hustle. Like, I'm ready to leave. I'm ready to break free. And so I'd help them build their capacity using all the different, more outside the box tools that I had. And then also, just naturally, I was able to consult because my brain just thinks businesses all day. So I'm able to assist and influence with some of that decision making. So it was really fun and I loved it. And I had that experience working with a lot of founders. And then COVID happened. So at the time, it was a lot of public speaking, it was coaching, it was consulting, it was building communities, adding value to different groups, and getting people to a place where they could see that, you know, wellness was a strategy. It's a growth strategy, not something that you just do on the weekends and then come back to your crazy life, but it's all woven in and part of it. But again, being able to speak that language of how do you build a brand and how do you, you know, make those decisions, and how do you optimize not just your systems, but yourself. But I love looking at both. Like, you need both. You need to optimize yourself, your system. So yeah, that's just a little bit of what happened when I was living out in San Francisco.
Wow, how things came together in that puzzle. Yes, you did follow the breadcrumbs, and you also took chances, and you did what you thought was calling you. And I love what you said about, you know, from the East Coast to the West Coast too, and that you were looking at this from not what is, but what could be. You knew that you needed to be somewhere else where they had those advancements, and you were also looking ahead of those advancements. You were merging then your expertise and the way you were thinking and applying that to business owners who were already established, where you knew they needed extra help to solve some of the pain points of their lack of creativity, you know, maybe personal and emotional stagnation because of their own wellness, which does have an impact on their business and strategy. I love what you also say about using their language, also about doing. So you have the theory, you have the foundation, the research to support it, but the doing part is also part of the process. And you were showing how to do it.
I think that's so important because there's so much research that's out there. Like, they talk about burnout, they talk about stress, they talk about all these things. And I'm always like, well, what are we going to do about it? What are we going to do about it? And instead of just pointing to it, or pointing that someone might have that problem, it's like observing that there might be a misalignment in their values, observing that there might be something going on in there, a lack of routine, a lack of rhythm within their day. I'm like, okay, let's bridge the gap here. And then here's a bunch of tools, and let's kind of see what's going to work, because everybody's different. And yet, if you don't have those tools, it just ends up being really frustrating for people. And I think that's where they were at when I met them, just frustrated. Like, I know what's going on. I talk about my therapist, I talk about my coach, I do this, I do that. And that's what I was looking for as well when I started my wellness journey, because everyone could point out what my issues were, but how do I bridge it? How do I bridge from the life I'm living to the life that I really want to live? Yeah, it's so important.
I think this is incredibly important. And I'm so glad we're talking about this today. As somebody who's worked in the medical field and somebody who has worked in mental health, a lot of people come saying, I think I have this and I'm diagnosed as this, and I want some meds for this, or my kid needs some meds for this. I would do the evaluation and think, maybe this kid or you would be good on trying such and such meds, but that doesn't go without learning new behaviors, learning things and techniques and tips that will help support your everyday journey to help modify what you're going through emotionally. And it makes a huge difference because I thought to myself, we really need to start there. But if you want to try this and combine it with this, that's okay too. But you can't have this without this.
Yeah.
You absolutely can't. Otherwise, I'm failing you. I would go on a personal level if I'd go to like a sermon or an inspirational talk. If you didn't give me a guideline or steps, I felt like you just set me up for failure. It's like I may not use every single step, but if at least I have a guideline and mold it to a way that I can use it, that's helpful. So I love what you're doing because I talk about this myself because I think it is so important. I think people do grab self-help books, and I've written one myself, but I also put steps in there. But I think people grab it and go, oh my gosh, this is the exact thing I needed. But it's like, are you utilizing the steps? Are those steps working for you? Are you creating steps that actually work for your everyday life?
I think a lot of people, when they came to me, they were like, I'm time blocking. I'm doing this productivity hack. I'm doing that. And so they're trying to use the steps. I think that was really frustrating because, like, I'm doing the steps and I'm still not seeing the results. So then people were working really, really hard because they were these high achievers and they weren't getting the results. And so a lot of what I started to share with them is, well, it's about energy management, not always about time management. It's not always about doing in these time blocks. It's about how you're doing it, not always what you're doing. It's about the how and where you're coming from when you're having these conversations, when you're making the decisions, when you're strategizing, when you're planning your day. It's not just the time blocks themselves. So that, I think, is what I started to become known for as well. And those tools for people who might have felt numb and weren't able to connect with the nuance of how they were actually feeling or be able to place themselves, that was really extraordinary to just see transition and transformation of going from kind of just feeling completely blocked to be like, oh, okay, now I have a new perception. Now I can see this about myself where they don't always need someone to point it out. So that was invaluable to people. We're like, whoa, like I can now figure out myself, point it out, and then I have the tool, or I know which tool to use because each tool is going to give you something different. Yeah, that was really impactful for them, but also fulfilling for me because, it was like just watching people grow and transform.
Yeah. Well, I love that because it's not just thinking, it's feeling. So that also comes into alignment. So the energy changes where you focus the energy, how you feel about expelling your energy, the way that it's being used, that was changing. And for a lot of people, it's not just a thought, it's how is that energy in alignment with what you're doing?
Yeah. I mean, men, of course, but for women,
especially for women. But once men get an idea of, oh, there is a connection between our thoughts and our emotions, it changes the direction and the trajectory of that business, how you achieve your goals, what goals you're actually setting. So let's talk about what inspired the creation of the Feminine Template and the Founder in Flow, and what impact do you hope to achieve with them both?
Yeah, so Founder in Flow came about during COVID. That was one of the first businesses that I launched in the pandemic world because I was on Clubhouse and I was being asked to actually lead events in the startup club. And there were thousands of people in that room, like daily, like looking for help, feeling alone all over the world. And I would be asked to come on the stage to help with the investors who were running. And they were like, you just have a lot of skills when it comes to like understanding the wellness part or the founder identity journey. And we want you to come in and help because we can't answer these questions. So I would give my time freely. And then eventually, I think I started just running these events by myself and bringing in other experts. And so I thought, I feel that there needs to be like a whole business curated for founders to help them understand a different approach. It's not just about the finances. It's not just about the marketing. It's not just about the strategy. It's also like, where do you fit in to this puzzle piece? Because until we started having these conversations, like I don't think that many people really consider themselves like a key aspect of the business. It was kind of like they came last and everything else came first until they received funding. And it's like, that's a big mistake because money can cause more problems. It doesn't actually solve your issues. It can just put more pressure on you. You can try to like cover things up that aren't working with more money and your business can still fail. And I just was like, this is ridiculous that so many companies fail. It's like 90% of startups fail within the first 5 years. And like, that's silly. Like, I think a big part of it is the support. So I created Founder and Flow. And then I think it was about a year later, I moved to Portugal, and someone who was building support for founders to be able to get funding, sell to one another. There were a lot of different aspects to this AI tech company. We were talking and we're like, we're supposed to work together. So I ended up becoming a co-founder of this AI company. And then Founder and Flow got put on the back burner. Although the work I was planning to do with Founder and Flow was going to be infused into this company. And then when the market crashed and people really weren't receiving funding, I was like, you know what? I personally can't do this right now as we're still like in COVID. And I decided to take a step back from the company and go back into the coaching world and supporting. And so I decided to go to Brown for leadership and performance. And even though I have been doing this work for a long time, I thought, I'm always looking to expand my skill set. And then when I was there during that program in Providence at Brown University, I was like, wow, it was so beautiful the way that it really bridged the gap between holistic practices, but also speaking the language of corporate and not taking away from what that looks like inside a person's day-to-day experience, whether you're in a company or again, corporate structure. But I was like, a lot of these tools are making me remember that women truly need to get into their body and that there's such a gap right now in how women are operating. And so I went down the rabbit hole more and more into like, wait a second, the things that I was taking for granted that I've been doing for years, like looking at my cycle and how I'm managing my energy as a woman and looking at my hormones, like, wow, there's no conversation that's actually being had about this. So even though Founder and Flow is very important and I'm still doing talks, I had a co-founder who joined me who has his PhD in psych, and we're still working on things behind the scenes. I was like, this aspect of a woman in business and not really being truly supported and conversations that aren't being had, I feel a little bit responsible that I need to start a party for this because there is no party. So the Feminine Temple is just going to be honestly a side coaching program. And then it just kept transforming. Like every day I'd wake up with this new insight. And by June, I had launched the website again, mostly as just this was going to be its own website now. I'd market my coaching through here. It'd be a coaching program. And I was like, oh, I'll get a couple of interns to help me out with this. I had 500 applicants in less than 2 days. And I was like, okay, there's a lot of women who are interested in helping me. This is interesting. Okay. Well, I interviewed many of them and decided I'll take on 50 by the end of the summer and I'll put them into teams and I'll figure it out. So I did that and it's been amazing. And there's essentially it expanded into more of it's about a community. It's much bigger than I had planned. So that is something, again, following the breadcrumbs and letting a business be what it's supposed to be rather than forcing it into the box that maybe you had originally planned. And that can go either way, right? Sometimes you want something to be really, really big, but there's not a market for it. And it's still meaningful, but it might be more of a smaller offering. And then sometimes something that you want to be small, there's just this natural demand or there isn't anything there that's big enough that's really causing conversation, community, and there's that gap. And so it's still transforming every day, but where it's headed is really amazing. It's amazing me every day on how it's taking off. And so a big part of the Feminine Template is really honoring a woman's distinct strengths, leveraging her natural cycles, and helping people understand that women are going to contribute differently in the business world. And it's not that we can't be consistent, but we're really meant to optimize our fluctuations to be able to drive business forward in the way that we could, which it's again, just different than how men create. It's different how men are going to build. And we live in a 24-hour world, which honors a male hormonal cycle. Like naturally, a man has a lot of energy in the morning and then he gets a little bit tired at night. But as a woman, like we could have a couple weeks out of our 30-day cycle, give or take, where we're a little bit low energy. But if we're pushing during that time, we don't ever get to experience our peak productivity, our peak performance. And the work that we can do in a given day, like around ovulation, for example, that's when we have the most energy. We can achieve a lot. Like what we could achieve in that day could be what it takes a man consistently over time. So it just looks different in how we produce and how we create. And I think women historically have been really tired, regardless if you have children or not. Women are really pushing their limit. So I knew that when it came to energy management, if I was to really focus on women, it would be a bit more complex because every woman has a different health experience and not every woman has a cycle. But it is helping one understand that this is a framework to go off of, like we talked about steps and
Yeah.
structure systems. The world is expanding. We have more access to understanding our hormones, understanding, where we fall, and using fertility apps, not just to predict if we're pregnant or not, but also, do we have the energy today?
Energy. Right.
And it impacts our decision making. It impacts our relationships. It's going to impact the way that we feel about ourselves. So, like right before my cycle starts, I always can get a little bit sad, or I might have low self-esteem. And the fact that I know if I'm pushing myself, I'm going to exhaust myself, and then I'm going to just make that situation worse, versus when I pull back, take care of myself, do what I need to do to self-regulate and take that self-care time, I'm actually going to have energy after that first week of my menstrual cycle. But every time I push it during that time, I always feel hungover. And so I was starting to again, intuitively recognize this, start to honor my body even more. And now with the feminine template, we're really backing everything up with scientific data of like why this actually works, creating different frameworks, tools. I created something called the Energy Dashboard, which gives people a framework to visualize what does that look like, because it's so abstract. So I put it into 4 different zones so that they can say, okay, based on where I'm at with my cycle, I really need to be in this zone. And how can I be in this zone? And what's the vice and virtue of each zone? So for example, if you're in Slack zone, which is like where you regulate, you can also be dissociating because you're maybe drinking alcohol or watching Netflix and, binging on movies, or you're on your phone, doom scrolling. So there's ways that people try to regulate, but they're actually dissociating, and they're actually indulging in a way that's not giving them the reboot time that they truly need, but it's still in that Slack zone. So it feels like you'd be regulating. And then there's all these other zones that we go through, but at the other end of the spectrum, it's strain. And people who are high performers, they tend to not know the difference between stretching, which is in that growth phase. So it can feel like growing pains, but there's a difference between growing pains and actually strain. Tipped over. So again, just bringing some color, bringing some words, bringing something that people can touch and see and try to visualize in their minds. And when I'm working with my interns, every time we have a meeting, they took the Energy Dashboard course, and we go through, hey, where are you at on the Energy Dashboard today? How can I help you? What do you need? How can you get back into a zone that's going to support you today? Because there's no right zone. It's just a matter of like, what do you need based on where you're at? What zone do you need to be in today? So it's been really fun to create this framework. I've been using it with clients for years, but then even, myself using it within teams and seeing the results of having people see that they have choice and how they want to operate and where they need to be based on their energy levels, and how it can be, again, both a vice or virtue, depending on how you're operating.
Yeah. Well, I love the name, the Feminine Template. It speaks to exactly what you're doing. It's innovative. There's structure to it, and it keeps evolving. That's so important for business owners to understand, is leave yourself open and your business open to evolution, to growth. Leave the business open to that energetic change. And you are providing that template. I love what we've talked about here. We've covered so much, and how you work with people regarding their energy, their wellness in tech and education, all these different areas, and how you're staying ahead of some of these really incredible trends. So thank you for, sharing your ideas today, sharing your strategies, and also sharing what you're doing out in the world to support men and women. So as we come to the close of the interview, my last question is, can you give one tip related to an approach to transform chaos into meaningful progress, or energy into meaningful progress?
Yeah, I call it the bow and arrow effect. So I think what happens most to entrepreneurs or business owners is that people are afraid to stop momentum, because they're like, well, I'm in the groove, and if I stop and I slow down, it's going to be hard to get back going again. And I would say, don't be afraid of the pause, be afraid of getting lost in inertia. and just like you're doing something and you're working through, it's like that strain period. Nothing is going to really happen when you're in the strain. So if you can pull back to move forward and just give yourself that wait time. And, again, what are you going to do in the wait time is also important. It's not just waiting and then stressing out the whole time and freaking out and letting your mind take over, but it's being strategic about the bow and arrow effect. So pulling back to move forward is what I have done many times to reduce that chaos and make progress. And sometimes that's creating systems in that pullback process so that I can scale. And so that communication can happen effectively, or that automation can happen. So I'm not manually putting something in and adding to my list of things I need to do when it doesn't need to happen. So in that pullback moment, what are you going to do to really like support yourself to not just keep up with that inertia, but propel yourself forward? And that to me is what progress is all about. Don't be afraid to lose your momentum and trade it out for something that's going to be more supportive for your growth.
Well, thank you, Emily, for joining me on the Core Women podcast today and all this incredible discussion and conversation regarding your evolution.
Fun summer. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. You can follow Emily Leahy on LinkedIn, on Instagram, X, and I am emilyleahy.com and thefemininetemplate.com.
Thank you for joining us on the Core Women podcast with Dr. Summer Watson. We're so glad you're here and would love to connect more with you. Find us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Core Women, and on Twitter at Core Women 1. For more about Core Women and Dr. Watson, visit corewomen.com. Want more support and resources for amazing women like you? Great! Join Dr. Watson and Jen Fontanilla at the Life, Love, and Money Collective, a Core Women production that aids in understanding the key traits that might be getting in the way of living a life that you are absolutely passionate about. Connect with Summer and Jen and find out more at thelifeloveandmoney.com.